So my name is Stephanie. I'm from WonderFil. So WonderFil has 36 thread lines. We carry threads from 100 weight all the way to 3 weight, and we cover machine and hand sewing for all the threads that we have. So I have Maura behind the camera. She's kind of helping me today just in case I need to share anything on the screen, or she'll kind of be keeping track of the chat just in case there's any questions that I can answer in the meantime. I know a lot of you submitted questions beforehand, and I can answer, I would say, like probably 85% of them in the talk that I'm going to be doing in the next 30 minutes. So if there's anything that I haven't covered, either we'll message you directly for more details on your specific questions, or I'll save them till the end so that I can be more clear on that specific topic. All right, so I want to remind everyone to stay till the end because we have some prizes. There's going to be 2 winners of Susan's selected spaghetti thread pack. So here, there's really yummy colors. So make sure you stay till the end. Maura will draw that name and I will announce it later, as well as there's going to be an exclusive offer that I'll also give you guys the deets on at the end as well too. So don't miss that. So I'll start with what is spaghetti. So really, spaghetti is a 12 weight, 3-ply, 100% Egyptian cotton, double gassed thread. So that's definitely a massive mouthful. And I'm going to break this down for you guys. So what does 12 weight mean? 12 weight is a heavier thread. It's pretty much the heaviest that you can sew through on your domestic machine, and like what will fit through the needle. So I know there was a few questions about bobbin work and stuff. So you don't have to actually do bobbin work with spaghetti. You can put that through the eye of your needle and sew with it. So that's what's great about 12 weight thread. And what is 3-ply? Many of you already know, but it basically just means it's 3 strands of cotton fibers twisted really tightly together to kind of create a rounder shape on the thread. And then it is a long staple cotton. Long staple cotton is really important because there's going to be a lot less fraying and it'll make your thread a lot more durable too. So just remember, length equals strength. So that's why long staple cotton is really important there. And last but not least is double gassing. Some of you may have heard about the term before, but double gassing essentially means that our cotton thread has gone through 2 rounds of a heat treatment to remove 80% of lint the first time and 80% the second time. We don't have any type of waxing or adhesive on the thread itself. So we do this process to create a really clean thread that you can sew with that will produce the minimum amount of lint in your machine. So that is what spaghetti is. And I quickly just want to throw in that we have fruity as well. So this is fruity. It's the same as spaghetti, except for it comes in variegated colors. So this would be like spaghetti, the solid color, fruity, the variegated color. They're the same 12 weight, 100% Egyptian cotton thread. All right. Okay. So how does it come in? So we have spaghetti and fruity on these mini spools, really great for road trips, especially if you're doing like any handwork or small projects, you can get them in a mini spool here. The next size we have are these 400-yard spools. These are kind of our standard size spools. And then lastly, if you're doing lots of quilting, we have them on these 1,000-yard spools here as well. And I should mention, they come in these packs. So these actually come in 5 different colorways. We have just this one here. This one is called Brights. And something that's new that we're showing for the first time is we actually have the full collection of spaghetti in the mini spools. This is a brand new set here that I want to show you guys first, with all these colors, so you have access to do all the pretty things that you want.
Oh my word, I didn't know about
excited. So yes, it is very exciting, and I'm so happy to show you guys first. Okay, so what can you do with spaghetti? I'm going to kind of break this down into handwork and then into machine work. So the first thing I want to say is that spaghetti is a bit finer than like kind of your standard 8 weight embroidery thread. I would compare it to kind of 2 strands of floss. So I have an example here. So this is spaghetti, and this is a stem stitch. So already it's a little bit thicker than if it was just like a straight back stitch. And this is an 8 weight. So you can definitely already tell the difference between the thicknesses of both, but you can use it for hand. I know a few people were curious about that. And it's definitely great for detailed embroidery work. If you're doing cross stitching and stuff like that, you can definitely use spaghetti. Maura, if you can actually bring up the cross stitching example. I just want to show you guys real quick. Oh, yes. Here, if you want to pause here for a quick second. I forgot to mention as well, this is a great comparison to show you guys the difference between a 12-weight thread and actually a 50-weight thread. So on the left, as you can see, is the 50-weight. And although it gives like a more delicate texture, if you're looking for that pop of color, you can definitely go with the 12-weight thread here. So just going back to that cross-stitching sample I mentioned. Okay. So this is just some cross stitching with spaghetti. So if you're doing something kind of small, this is a really nice choice. If you want to go to the next photo, there's a bit of a scale so you guys can see the size of that sample. And I actually wanted to show you a project that one of our users, her handle on Instagram is Nerds and Needles, and she does a lot of awesome hand embroidery about like pop culture things. So I'm just gonna ask Maura to pull this up as well. And she did actually some of the florals here with the spaghetti and more of the French knots with the 8-weight. So you can definitely play with the different weights. This is like an awesome sample that she has. Her handle is up top if you guys are interested in following her. But yeah, so spaghetti can definitely be used for hand, especially if you're looking for something a bit thinner than an 8-weight thread. Yes, okay. And I also wanted to show you needle punch with the 8-weight. So in this case, I'm actually going to pull up one of Susan's quilts where she used needle punch on the middle part of her flower. So Maura is just bringing that up right now as well. There we go. So is everyone able to see that? So yeah, you can kind of see the different applications of spaghetti here in terms of handwork. It's a very popular option. You can also do hand quilting. So here you can actually see where the hand quilting was done and the machine quilting was done. So this is a really great example of the blend of both uses of spaghetti. So that's good. And like I said, it's a really popular option. I feel like in the last few years too, I've seen more and more people pick up hand quilting, which I think is super awesome. Behind me here, I have, oh, this one. This is sashiko with spaghetti. This is with fruity. And then on this pillow is machine sashiko. I'll talk more about machine sashiko in a bit, but you have those options too. So that's what I wanted to show you. Show you there. So let me just make sure if there's any questions. I know there's a few questions about machine needles, so I'll definitely cover that in detail once I move to the machine portion. So yes, with a lot of our hand stuff, we were using a number 7 embroidery needle. And I just want to mention too that if you're having troubles pulling the thread through with the needle, you just want to move your needle size up because you don't want to put so much strain on your thumb and your fingers as you're pulling the thread through, and you're putting more resistance on the thread, the fabric, and your hand. So sometimes just moving the needle size up will make a huge difference. Okay, so machines. So the first thing is needle size. I know Maura briefly mentioned that we recommend using a 90-14 needle or a 116 needle. And a lot of the samples that I'll be showing you, it'll be a 116 needle that we've used because we do a lot of like free motion embroidery artsy stuff. So I just have this giant Schmetz needle I want to show you guys about why a top stitch needle is important. So I don't actually know if this is a top stitch needle, but with a top stitch needle, you actually get a bigger eye. And another thing too is in the needle, there's actually a groove here. I'm not sure if you guys can see that, but there's a groove. And it'll actually make the thread sew more smoothly every time it goes through the fabric. It'll just allow more space for that thread to slip through into that fabric. And if it's nice to mention too that if you guys are going to be sewing through like a fusible stabilizer or anything that might have like a sticky back, you would use a super non-stick needle, 116 super non-stick needle by Schmetz. And I definitely also encourage people to practice stitching out a sample before you like work on your actual project. It's always a good thing to do because I know a lot of machines are calibrated for like a 40 or 50 weight, but there's so many functions on your machine that you don't just buy it for that one use. You should definitely learn how to like play with the different tensions and knobs and stitches on there. So I know the next thing that's really important is talking about the bobbin. So now we're going to move to the bobbins. So we use an 80 weight bobbin for majority of our work. It is because it's a very strong thread still that can hold down the spaghetti, even though it is a heavier thread, and really provide like a flat stitch without too many like tension issues and stuff like that. And I'll quickly pull up the picture of what it looks like between a pre-wound bobbin and a self-wound bobbin. So on the right here, you can see our Deco Bob pre-wound bobbin, and you can actually see it's a lot more evenly wound to provide a more even stitch and a better stitch quality when you actually stitch it through. And it isn't stretchy, so it won't actually pull your stitches down and it won't create any puckers in your stitching. This is especially important if you're planning on doing like any embroidery or decorative stitching it with it. It'll definitely help you keep a more flexible and not too stiff like final project after you're done with it, since there will be a lot of thread in it. So I just wanted to highlight, this is the Deco Bob on the right and then a self-wound on the left there. So that's good. Okay, and I want to show you actually what kind of difference that makes. So I'll hold this up really quick. This is done by one of our thread educators. Her name is Marge, and this was her COVID quarantine project. And this is actually a panel that she thread painted everything on with spaghetti. So it has tons of spaghetti in here and all of it's thread painted on. And everything in the back is actually done with Deco Bob. So like I said, this is a lot of thread, but it's still really flexible. And you don't get like a piece of cardboard. So that's why it's also very important to use a finer thread. The only time I would recommend maybe moving up to a slightly thicker thread up from Deco Bob is if you have a thicker fabric that you're going through, or like a thicker sandwich that you're going through. I just want to do a quick close-up on that thread painting so I can really show you guys the detail that went into this. So this is all done with spaghetti. And she kind of just did this very small micro quilting all around it. And you can kind of go through the pictures more and show them. Yeah. So really cool stuff you can do here. And if you go to the top to show Fruity, this is kind of like a stained glass window look. This is with Fruity, that variegated thread. So this is more like she did more like this micro quilting instead of fully filling in the colors. So very cool stuff there. Okay, so the next thing for tips for success is I would definitely suggest increasing your stitch length from about a 2.5 to 3. Because you are using a heavier thread, you don't need such a short stitch length. You can actually increase it from about 2.5 to 3, and you can play around with that. If you prefer longer, you can even extend it to a bit longer. And then that way you won't get like a super bulky, thick, and dense stitch when you do a normal like straight stitch. So that's it for the basics part. And now I kind of want to go into techniques really quickly here. So for long arming and quilting, we suggest using a size 18 needle. We suggest not going too fast. So yes, you can use this in the long arm, and don't go too fast. Don't go zipping through. And again, with increasing your stitch length. So on the long arm, that's about 9 to 10 inches or 9 to 10 stitches per inch. And it can definitely like create a beautiful texture and harmony between the thread and the quilt, because the thread will actually sit more on top of the quilt instead of like sinking into it. You'll get that effect more with finer threads if that's what you're looking for. So Maura has a sample of just spaghetti quilted on a batik. And there's nothing, the main highlight is the thread on the batik. So I just want to show that to you guys. There you are. So, and then if you want to do the zoom in, so there it is. So all this is just some free motion with the fruity thread on the fabric, and kind of doing more like fiber artwork with that. Okay, moving on. I know we had some questions about different long arm machines. I saw APQS and Handy Quilter and stuff. And yes, Spaghetti works on both that machines. We use it on our Handy Quilter here at the office. So like I said, just use the tips I mentioned before about increasing your stitch length and going up in your needle size there. Okay, the next thing I wanted to touch on is decorative stitching. So decorative stitching is definitely a highlight for Spaghetti. You can see it here. We just have like a quick sample of some cute stitches you can do here. You can add it to your bags or pillows. This one, we did it on a pillowcase. So when you're doing decorative stitching, we definitely recommend using a medium weight stabilizer in the back just to prevent any puckering. And something you do have to do, because it is a bigger thread, is you'll have to increase the width of the decorative stitch and also the length a bit, just to make more space for that thread to fill in, so it's not stitching on top of each other. All right, so here it is again. And on the edge here, this is actually done on the machine as well. This is just machine made crochet with wash away stabilizer behind. So this is the whole pillowcase there. And I mentioned bobbin work before. Like I said, it's not super necessary because it fits, the thread fits through the eye of the needle. So you can actually just do your free motion quilting with Spaghetti without having to go through the work of winding on your bobbin and drawing it out and stuff. All right. And lastly, before I move on to embroidery, I did want to talk about machine applique, because this is another really great use for Spaghetti. I have a big quilt here that I'll hold up for you guys. Is that in the middle? Okay, so this is just a quilt where all the pieces were actually appliqued with Spaghetti. Maura has a picture to zoom in on, but essentially you can see here, we have a few pieces that haven't been appliqued yet, but you can see a blanket stitch with Fruity, and also just some decorative stitching on the edge with Spaghetti too. So that's how we did this whole quilt actually. And we just did some more textured stitching for the quilting portion of it. So I wanted to show this to you guys really quick. All right. Lastly, I want to talk about embroidery. Okay, so you can embroider with spaghetti. My tips though is that you would definitely need to enlarge the piece, or you want a piece that's not too heavily too dense in terms of the embroidery, because like I said, you don't want it to go on top of each other too much. And if it is, you might just need to make it bigger to make room for the stitch. And also use the finer bobbin in the back so you don't get a super stiff piece of embroidery. You want something that's a little bit more flexible, especially if you're putting it on clothing or anything like that. So definitely also move up to 116 needle so that there's more space for that thread to move through in the needle too. So Maura, can you just pull up the flower? So it creates a really nice, more vintage look because it is a bit more matte than your standard rayon or polyester if you're embroidering with that. So I really actually like the look of cotton embroidery. I think it looks really nice. So here, this one's actually all done with spaghetti. So there's a quick look at that. And the back of that one is all with Deco Bob as well. And we used a fusible tearaway for the back. And so this kind of goes on to using it on like cork or pleather, any heavier fabrics. If you're doing upholstery, you can also use spaghetti there. Those are also really great applications to add some dimension and durability if you're doing like some bag handles and stuff like that. So I would definitely recommend it for those uses as well. I know I kind of zipped through this first portion quite fast and we had a bit of technical difficulties in the middle, but I don't want to cut into Susan's segment of this talk too much. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce her more formally. So I don't know if we want to like pin her or spotlight her. I think it will be okay now, I am hoping. And then you can take me off the spotlight. Okay, there we go. Okay, we got Susan on the spotlight. So before I begin this next part, I know everyone's super excited to see her. I just wanted to say we'll keep tabs on the questions, like I said before, and we'll ask Susan closer to the end so that she can kind of, you know, do her magic. Susan's actually our first guest of this thread talk, so we're super excited. And she's like our own personal spaghetti connoisseur. So without further ado, I'm just going to ask her a few questions and then we'll, you know, dive right into it. So Susan, we know you very well. You're a very good friend of ours. Can you give us a brief introduction of yourself, though, to those of you who are meeting you for the first time?
Sure. Kind of my background in sewing is that I started sewing kind of around 12 or 13 years old, and I sewed garments and stuff. And then I didn't start quilting until my two kids were little. And I had left my job at IBM to be a stay-at-home mom. And then when they, you know, grew a few years that I could actually sneak away into the sewing room a little bit. And that's when I started quilting. And shortly after that, shortly after I started, I found out that there are all these competitions and these awesome shows. And so I entered a quilt into Paducah. That's not where most people start, but I didn't know of other shows. So I got a quilt in there. I was not a winner, but I started getting my quilts juried into the big shows. And that got noticed by the local shop owner. And she asked me if I would be interested in teaching quilting classes. Well, I wanted to be a teacher back in high school. They told me the market's flooded, you'll never get a job. So I went into engineering instead. So I was elated to be asked to teach, and I absolutely loved it. And then that started on my designing patterns, and I have invented a couple of tools. I have a patent, and then teaching, you know, further and further and further away from home, and it ended up a international thing. And there was one fateful day at International Quilt Festival Houston. It was the last hour of the show, and I was on my way out of the place. And I was strolling down, I was really booking down this aisle, and I see the WonderFil booth. And I'm like, I don't know about that thread. I'm stopping. And so I stopped and I talked with Andrew, and I was so impressed with two things: the dedication to quilters, how much they care about how quilters use their threads. And the second thing was how really knowledgeable he is on so many different disciplines or genres within sewing and within quilting. Very, very impressed. And then later on, I got to meet more of the WonderFil people, and they're all awesome. And the Fruity was the first 12 weight. And I had been dabbling in heavy threads. And that 12 weight thread was much nicer to work with than the other 12 weight threads on the market at that time. And so the next show, I went back to Andrew and I said, hey, I said, you've got all this beautiful variegated 12 weight thread. How about some solids? And then Spagetti was born, and it's been fantastic. So that's my background in quilting and how I got into working so much with WonderFil products.
Yeah, and I should definitely mention, I forgot to mention before that actually 19 colors of our spaghetti collection were selected by Susan. So she really had a direct hand in creating this collection that has been available for many years now, and lots of people love it. So the next question I want to ask you is, what kind of projects are you working on right now?
Well, let's see. Just before the craziness of the year hit, I came out with a new book. It's called Dynamic Dresdens. It's this one. It's my favorite book cover that I've done. And so I'm getting now into teaching more from that book. I'm developing a new class from that book, and developing a new class is a huge undertaking. So I'm working on that right now. I've got a new competition quilt in the works. I'm not ready to show any pieces of that yet, but there is a lot of spaghetti going into it.
Cool.
Even as I'm making the blocks, I'm trying a new technique with spaghetti that I haven't done before. And I think it's pretty cool. I have no idea when you're going to see this quilt. It could be, well, it will be more than a year from now, because my show quilt take me forever. I'm just anxious to get back with my people out there quilting in May of next year. There's a very exciting thing going on. I am hosting a quilters trip to Japan for 10 days. And I am super excited about that. So if anybody wants to find out the details of that, it's on the main page of my website, which is piecesbewithyou.com. And come with me. We're going to have a blast. We get to take classes from Japanese instructors. Oh my gosh, it's going to be really, really fun.
I know, that definitely sounds so exciting, especially in Japan. And with all this extra information, I want to let all of you guys know too that we'll be sending up a follow-up email, and we'll definitely include how to get to Susan's website and how you can connect with her, or if you're actually interested in going to Japan after this long time, staying at home. We'll leave that information too, so you can follow up with it and find Susan and see what kind of show she's going to. Because, we connected with her a few days ago and we found out she's actually lined up for, I think you said like 9 upcoming shows.
I've got in this late summer, early fall, I've got 9 gigs, just boom, 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 boom. So yeah, it's gonna be a little hectic.
Yeah.
And I feel kind of out of practice. So it
Yeah,
always
I
works
totally know
out.
what you
Somehow
mean.
it always works out.
I know, definitely know how you mean, especially with us starting to trickle into show territory again too. So yes, don't worry everyone, we'll provide more information on that. So it'll all be in the upcoming emails. So we're really lucky to have her today with us, and she'll actually be doing some demos like I mentioned before. And I'll just let you go on with this part. I don't want to take up too much of your time talking and stuff. So if you guys have any questions, just write them in the chat and then we'll ask them to Susan at the end. So I'll just pass it over to you now.
Oh, excellent. And Stephanie, don't be shy about saying, whoa, just a minute. Can we have more detail on that, or take me in a certain direction? Because I just get so excited about this stuff. I'm like a freight train. I just started going and
Okay,
I'll be late
good.
for supper. So so watch out for me, okay?
Okay, got it.
So the reason that I started playing with heavy decorative threads is I came into quilting in the mid 90s. It was right when free motion quilting was really the huge thing. Free motion quilting was it. It had crossed over that line of thinking that machine quilting was cheating. And people were getting quite good at it. And so I took a whole bunch of classes and everything. Free motion quilting is not the way my brain works. I really, really struggled. And the teachers that I took classes from were so sweet. They just applauded my effort. But it was very hard for me. And I did not enjoy doing it. I love seeing your beautiful free motion quilting, not mine. So I had to figure out, how can I quilt my quilts with techniques that I enjoy and results that I love seeing. And it turns out that kindergarten level simple quilting with big threads really serves the purpose for me. Then I also got into heavy, kind of like sashiko stitching or big stitch hand quilting, that kind of thing. Then I started using the heavier threads for raw edge applique and such like that. And oh my gosh, my eyes were popping out of my head as Stephanie was showing us all those different samples and all those different techniques of spaghetti. There's a lot more to do with spaghetti than what I do with spaghetti, but I'm going to share with you how I like to use it. So I mentioned very simple designs. Okay, so I think this quilt right here, and I might be popping in and out of camera a little bit as I'm grabbing different stuff and as I'm knocking my things on the floor. So look at this little quilt here. Okay, the simple quilting lines really do it for me. I like these simple lines and they are quite doable. They are quite doable. Now, I first quilt in the ditch with Invisifil thread. So check out the YouTube videos on Invisifil thread. Invisifil thread is a number 100 cottonized poly. That means it's a poly that behaves like a cotton, which is a fabulous thing. So I quilt in the ditch with Invisifil first. That nails down all these seam lines so that when I go do my decorative stuff, it doesn't pull anything out of straight. So I really want to point that out. I really want to stress that step. Now, if your eye doesn't see seams being pulled out of straight when you just go in and start your decorative quilting, then that's not an issue for me. For you, it is for me. I really like to nail down these seam lines, and so I quilt in the ditch in most of my seams with Invisifil first. Then I go in and I like doing very simple designs with the heavy spaghetti thread. Now, another thing that this quilt reminds me to share with you is how I really try to avoid marking my quilts. So here's a little tip. Cut designs out of freezer paper and then iron that freezer paper on your quilt sandwich and then stitch around the freezer paper and then pull it off and iron it on elsewhere. As long as you do a dry iron and you don't stitch into the paper, just stitch beside it, you can reuse that again and again. So there's a little tip to help you work with that. And I'm stitching with my feed dogs up. And I do that with up to a twin size quilt. Some of my wall quilts are pretty big. Now I'm not making king size, but you could, if you are mindful about your quilting design and how much you need to turn and twist that quilt in the machine. Okay, and that's if you're quilting with your feed dogs up like I like to do. Now I saw Some questions come up about, can spaghetti be used in the Baby Lock Sashiko machine? Baby Lock has told me, now Stephanie, you correct me if they have changed their position on this, but years ago, Baby Lock told me they do not recommend a 12 weight cotton in their Sashiko machine. However, that's how this quilt was done. Okay. And I really, really love that background quilting. That was done on the Baby Lock Sashiko machine.
Actually, can I pop in real quick as well? Now that
Please
I
do.
actually, yeah. So the pillow I was showing earlier as well was done on the Sashiko machine. I would say they are calibrated for 30 weight, which is why they don't recommend it. I would say just go extra slow, stitch with care, and it won't be a problem. So that's what I would say too. Just go
Yes,
slow.
thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And what I was told was that perhaps they are trying to be careful and avoid people putting in a low quality 12 weight thread. And by the way, WonderFil's 12 weight thread, I like it the best of the others on the market. It is the tightest twisted 12 weight thread, which makes it a smoother, more round thread. And yet, even with the tight twist, it is supple. It's not stiff, it's not straw-like. So here's a good example of with the Baby Lock Sashiko machine. Now, let's see, what else can I show you? Oh, here is some just quilting. You see these little railroad tracks out here? That's just straight line quilting with my feed dogs up with spaghetti. And then for some reason, I seem to enjoy quilting railroad tracks. And then sometimes I put something in between the railroad tracks. So that's a little sequin with a little bead on top of there. So that's way fun to do. Let's see. I also do, I'm going to be kind of jumping around because I'm going to show these little quilts and then I'm going to be pulling quilts off the wall behind me. But so this is, now we're moving to handwork. Okay. So this, okay, it's the same little quilt as that navy one that I showed you, but in funky fabrics. So this is what I call my Morse code hand quilting. So this is 2 strands of spaghetti, hand quilting, and then just every once in a while I do some French knots. So I'll hold up that a little closer. Hopefully you can see those little French knots. Now also I want to call attention to the applique. That's raw edge applique. And I appliqued the flowers with that kind of orangey gold. But then you'll see around the outside edge of the flower, you'll see like an orange coral color. So the orangey coral color is the quilting through all the layers. Stephanie, I see that some questions are coming up, so go ahead and pop in and let me know because I'm trying to concentrate on what I'm showing and I'm not seeing all the questions, okay? I think there was a question about the hand needle when doing big stitch hand quilting or Morse code hand quilting with spaghetti. Is that true? I'll tell everybody the hand needle that I like to do, I like to use. When I am doing sashiko quilting or big stitch hand quilting, I guess sashiko isn't technically the right term to use. I like this brand of needle. I like the Hiroshima tulip needle, the sashiko needles, and this is assorted short. So with spaghetti, I use the smallest needle in this assorted box. And then also in this box, in this container, there's a needle big enough to do number 8 pearl cotton. Now, whenever I pick up a hand needle, I like to use these finger cots or needle pullers just on the finger that's pulling the needle, because pulling a heavier thread through a quilt sandwich is, it gets a little, there's more resistance there. And so we can use much less pinch strength if we have a needle puller or a finger cot on that finger that is pulling the needle. It's not a thimble. It's not for pushing the needle. It's for pulling the needle. I also find that I have real good luck with that. Oh, where did it go? Oh, I know. I put it in my pocket. I also like a good thimble when I am doing big stitch hand quilting. Now this thimble, obviously a thimble is for pushing the needle. I like this one. This is a Roxette thimble, which there's a cutout for your fingernail, and then also it's rounded here. So when you push the needle, you're using more surface area of your finger. And so I really like that. So I'll put my thimble on Tall Man. I'll put my or my needle puller on this one, and then I'll go to it. And they'll help you work pulling a heavier thread through your fabric.
I have a quick question, Susan.
Yes.
So how do you secure the start and end of your quilting with the 12 weight thread?
Okay. By machine, I have a little setup over at the sewing machine, so I will show you that. By hand, you can pop a knot, but I prefer not to. I prefer not to pop a knot, okay? Because that thread is heavier, so you're popping a heavier knot through. So I was taught with hand quilting when I very first learned to hand quilt. It was with fine thread. And what I was taught is that you tunnel under the top fabric, under your quilt top, tunnel underneath and come out at your beginning point, and then quilt over that tunneled tail. And when you quilt over that tunneled tail, if you pierce that a couple of times, and you will, even with a fine thread, you can pull on that as hard as you can pull and will not come out. And then for ending, I go under just the top and I weave back and forth in the quilt sandwich. I weave back and forth 2 needle lengths away from me and 1 needle length toward me. And it's a very, very secure finish. Okay. You might be able to find some stuff on that on YouTube. It is covered in my quilting class that is on Craftsy. That's also available on DVD on my website, but it's not my idea. I don't know whose idea it was. It was taught to me, by somebody who learned it from somebody else. But that's a very secure way for starting and stopping hand stitching of any kind. Now, if you're doing a bunch of curves, then you can't start and stitch over your tunneled thread. And so when I do need to pop a knot, I pop it through my quilt backing instead of my quilt top, so that if it's a little yucky just right there, we're not going to see it. Okay. And when I get to the machine, I've got a little demo for how I tie off and bury thread tails with machine stitching. So I'll just defer that. Now somebody needs to make sure that I remember to show that. Okay. All right. Let's see. So I've got some more stuff for you. Oh, here's a little one that fell down. So this is raw edge applique with very little contrast. This is like the first one that I did. But then look at the background quilting is big stitch hand quilting with the spaghetti. And I just love what the handwork does for a project. I just think it's really fun. And you know what? I do want to note to everybody, I do want to point out or emphasize, mixing hand and machine work in the same project is perfectly a-okay. When I started quilting, I thought, oh my gosh, do I have to stick with all handwork or all machine work, or can I mix it up? If I start quilting with one color of thread, must I do the entire project with that color of thread? The beautiful news is today, there's not right and wrong stuff. It's just educate yourself so that you know what choices are out there, and then you can make choices to please yourself. You don't have to do what everybody else is doing. And I find that really refreshing. And look at all the beautiful things that Stephanie showed us, all these techniques with spaghetti. It took some gutsy people to say, I wonder if this would work with this thread. And maybe it didn't work at first, but they kept playing around until they found a way for it to work. And so, go ahead and try some stuff. Oh my
Yeah, I
gosh, it's
agree.
way fun.
Definitely. And quickly before you move on, could you show the back of the quilt for the sashiko stitch? And maybe
Oh,
I think I think there was another quilt you had held up. If
that's
we
a
could see
good
just like the
idea.
back of it. Mhm.
So here is Baby Lock Sashiko machine quilting. Now, you know what? I kind of want to point out there are a lot of different machine manufacturers who say that their machine does a mock hand quilting stitch, and that stitch has monofilament in between the visible stitches. The Baby Lock Sashiko machine has nothing between these visible stitches, nothing. So keep that in mind, okay? Now the back, let's see if I can show you right here. You can see where I quilted around the daisies, and then see out here at the edge, it looks kind of like a straight stitch, which is the back side of the machine sashiko stitch. So the back side is a solid line. It looks like just a straight machine stitch.
Oh,
It's a
nice.
fascinating machine. It really is. It's a fascinating. You got to watch it work. There is no top and bobbin thread. There is only bobbin thread.
Yes,
There is
that's
no thread in the quilt.
right.
It blows my mind. I was fascinated by the silly thing. Now let me grab another little quilt over here. This quilt. Okay, I'll show you the whole thing, and then we'll zoom in. All right. This background is an upholstery weight fabric. And I wanted to quilt the background before I put the Dresdens on. And you see, I chose a low contrast. I chose a medium to dark gray spaghetti thread to just stitch some simple lines in this quilt background. And then I put the Dresdens on the quilted quilt, okay? But that's a whole nother story. So if I had stitched this with just a regular weight thread, it would look skimpy and it would look kind of funny. It would look skimpy. But with the heavier thread, it packs a bigger punch. It carries more weight. And so I think it's appropriate for this chunky fabric. And I really like that look. Now I'm going to grab this quilt off the wall. I'm going to bring you over here. Come on over here with me. Okay, on this quilt, I ditched it first with Invisifil so that these seams stayed straight. And then I just added parallel lines. Now, I think it's a good idea before you get too far into your quilting design or thinking that you think about how important is the quilting on this piece. Sometimes it's less important, sometimes it's more important. In this piece, this ringy dingy quilt, it's not that important, but I wanted it to still look nice when people got right up close to it. So I'm going to pull it off the wall and show you what I did. After I ditch quilted it on these gray pieces, I used spaghetti and I just quilted straight lines on these gray pieces. Let's see if there's one that shows up. There we go. All right, now if that would have been regular weight thread, it would look skimpy. But to my eye, that spaghetti just in parallel, uneven lines looks wonderful when you come up close to this quilt. I don't mean to draw attention to that quilting from across the room. That's not what this quilt is about, okay? So then in these black portions, every once in a while, I just put in a few lines of a bright color spaghetti thread. Just a straight stitch on my machine. Thank you, Denise. So I spent some time thinking about what the quilting, what its job was, what it needed to do in this piece. And then that's how I came up with that solution. Sometimes it's all about the quilting, not on my quilts. Sometimes the quilting is a supporting role. I still want it to look great when people get up close, but it doesn't, it's not the feature. It's not the feature of that quilt. Okay, let's see. This one is kind of same story. as the other one. Just I needed some background quilting that looked good when you came up close, but it was not the main feature. And the spaghetti thread in just straight lines did the job. And again, in regular weight thread, I think that would look skimpy. Okay, I would have needed a lot more quilting, for my eye anyway, for it to look, let's say, right, even though I don't really want to use that word, but hopefully you get the gist of it. Okay, it gives the quilt a very rich look. Thank you. I think so. I think so. I mean, you can quilt straight lines. You can quilt with your feed dogs up. You can do that. I have made a career of it. Okay. Oh, all right. Now this one's a little different. All right. I had a stinker of a time figuring out how I wanted to quilt this quilt. I'll be real honest with you. I struggle with quilting backgrounds. I really do. On this one, I by hand stitched X's in the background.
So did you do the quilting under some of your applique first and then completed the quilt?
Not on this quilt, but on other ones, definitely. I do the quilting on my Dresden quilts. I do the background quilting, and then I take the Dresdens, I lay them on the quilted quilt, and I use Invisifil to ditch those Dresdens onto the quilted quilt. So fun.
Okay, nice trick.
So for this, oh, it worked beautifully. So for this one, I used, let's see. I think this orangey gold might be an 8 Procon, but these X's in the background are with spaghetti, and I just changed colors every once in a while. The name of this quilt is Fireworks in Funky Town. So I needed some little sparkly, like, you know, the little fragments, the little leftover fireworks things. So that's what's going on there. And then my very favorite quilt is over here. Oh, I just love this quilt. There's a lot of spaghetti in this quilt. There is also turned edge applique. This quilt has turned edge applique, and for turned edge applique, I like Invisifil. Different from a lot of quilters, I use a small zigzag with my Invisifil instead of the blanket stitch or the blind hem stitch for my turned edge invisible machine applique. So this is a competition quilt, and so the applique is turned edge. That's just how I like to do for my competition quilts. For my just fun little silly quilts, I like to do raw edge with a blanket stitch with spaghetti, and I'm going to show you that at the machine. So this one, spaghetti, is what sparked the most comments about this quilt when it hung in shows. It got a first place at the 2 biggest shows, International Quilt Festival Paducah, or International Quilt Festival Houston, and the American Quilters Society show in Paducah. I'm just tickled with that. So after I did the turn edge applique with the skinny thread, then I layered it up, and then I outlined all of the applique with a heavy spaghetti in charcoal. And that's what I want to hold up next to the camera, because people were standing probably 4 feet from that quilt, and they could see that there was a dark outline around these applique pieces and around these applique pieces and around these applique pieces. So I'm going to bring that up to the camera for you. It almost like, if you know something about graphic design, it's almost like adding a drop shadow. It made those applique pieces pop off the surface of the quilt. It changed it completely. So let me get this right up for you. All right, you see those xylophone pieces? You see how it looks like they have a drop shadow? They are just popping off the surface of that quilt. You see those daisies? I quilted around them with the dark charcoal spaghetti thread. And well, and then the wigwag out here. Okay, now the background quilting that you see here, the small daisies are done in 8 pearl cotton, and the big daisies are done in number 5 pearl cotton. So all the eleganza, WonderFil eleganza pearl cottons. So lots of different threads on this piece, and I love this piece. Are there questions before I move over to the machine and show you some stuff? Thank you, Miriam. Oh, Miriam, I am a busy lady, but you're looking at quilts from many years, actually. I think a lot of times people think I quilt every day. Oh, honest to Pete, I go months without quilting, but if that happens, that means I'm out teaching, and I love that too. So, you know, I'm not whining because I love
have a question for you, Susan.
Yes.
So what draws you into using the specialty threads like the 5, 8, the 5, the 8, the 12, the 100 weight? Like what entices you to use those kind of specialty weight threads?
It's the effect that I want, the look that I want. There is so much more than just plain regular weight thread. The only thing that I do with 50 or 60 weight thread is piecing. All my quilting, either I don't want it to show because it's in the ditch quilting, so I need a skinny thread that won't show, or I want it big and bold. I can play with how much boldness, how much impact I have, not only with the weight of the thread, but the contrast with color. And I'm always doing little sample pieces and trying different things. Sometimes a certain thread I prefer how it looks by machine. Sometimes I prefer how it looks by hand. And so I practice all of those different techniques so that I have the skills to get the look that I want and get the impact that I want. And I don't know, maybe I'm a little ADHD, I don't know, but I like I like to put a lot of different techniques in one quilt. And I don't very often do repeated block quilts. I think I like a lot of variety.
Well,
I don't know.
yeah, I think that's why it's so special, right? And yes, I definitely encourage people to try more different things in their quilts. And if you're nervous about it, I would, write down your default settings so you can go back to them on your sewing machine. And then when you start playing around, once you hit that sweet spot, write those numbers down as well, so you know what to go back to. Mm-hmm.
Yes. And also realize that the sweet spot can change even with the same setup if you just change thread colors. So it is a good idea to write down your result. That is a good idea. But also it's very important to learn how to get the result that you want. And then you can pick up any new thread and think, okay, can this go in the needle? Should it go in the bobbin and quilt upside down? Should I couch it on there? Should I couch it by hand? Should I couch it by machine? Should I big stitch quilt by hand? I mean, there are so many options. And it's also cool because you can find what you enjoy doing the most too. I definitely have certain favorite techniques and other techniques that I'm like, that's not my thing, and it's just cool today in quilting. It's all okay as long as your quilt is structurally sound, it's held together, it's neat and tidy.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Beyond that, it's your preference, and it's not right and wrong. I tell people, if it's structurally sound and you're enjoying it, then you're doing it right.
That's a really good tip. I agree with that.
My design wall looks so plain now. Everything's on the floor.
I know, you took out all your quilts. I have a few questions that popped up in the chat. So are the Dresden quilts in your new book?
Yes. Those Dresden quilts are all projects in the new book, the Dynamic Dresden's book.
Good.
There are also some things that help that technique go more smoothly. I'm using the Prairie Pointer tool to turn the points on those Dresdens, so they come out just nice and pointed and so lovely, and you never poke a hole in the end which is a problem we've had traditionally. And then also I worked with a company, and I have 2 Dresden rulers that are illustrated in the book. Now, you don't have to have specialty tools to do projects from my books. I write them so that you could do them with or without the specialty tools. Specialty tools usually make things faster. Sometimes it makes things more accurate, but they are optional, at least in my instructions, in my patterns and books. So
Yeah, I think that's great. Definitely makes it a lot more accessible for people.
yeah. I used to think, oh my gosh, I'm not going to buy a new tool unless I can do at least 3 or 4 different things with it. And then somewhere along the line, it dawned on me, you know what? If that's going to save me some time and it is not a ridiculous cost, I'm doing it. You know, our time is valuable. And I think I kind of didn't realize that for a long
time. For sure.
Well,
Okay,
I
let's
think
see what
I'll
else.
take everybody to the machine, and then we can come back to here and I can grab those quilter on the floor if anybody wants to see. Oh, somebody did the prairie pointer tool with their Dresdens. Oh, awesome. Yay. So what I'm going to do is I have to take this camera to the machine over there. So the screen is going to turn blue for a little bit. I'll talk so you know you haven't lost me while I move you over there, okay? But here we go. What I've got here for the setup is I've got spaghetti in the needle. I am using a 100 top stitch needle today. Sometimes I use a 90 top stitch needle. Now, why am I calling out both? I prefer to poke a smaller hole in my project. So I kind of prefer to use the 90 top stitch needle when I can. But if I don't get good results, then I'll move to the 100 top stitch needle. So that's why I'm calling out both of those. Now, just goes to show you that there's more than one way to do all of these things. I have WonderFil Afina in my bobbin. And so that's what I have put in my bobbin for right now. I have found that on this particular machine, I get best stitches when I engage. There's a built-in dual feed or a built-in walking foot back here. And I find that I get better stitches if I have that engaged. So that's something that you might want to be mindful of. Okay. And so then right now I've got my stitch length set at a 3.5. I kind of like that. Right now it just happens to be that my tension is at a 5.25. And so let's see what we get here. And so if you saw this setup, you would really laugh because this is kind of, I am quilting kind of, sorry for that. That was the Bernina burp. Okay, so I've got this little setup here. So needle up and then that up. Okay, now I'm going to turn this around and take a look. Okay, so you see what a pretty stitch that is? And I want to point out that you see this top thread is not laying tight across the surface with the bottom thread coming up and looping over it. That is not structurally sound. This is, I call it a nice humped stitch, where it's coming up and then pulled down into the quilt sandwich and coming up and pulled down into the quilt sandwich. And then on the back, there you can see I've got a nice stitching line. Now at that very beginning, it did pull that top thread through, but that's not a problem. So you see I've got a nice stitch line back here. Now what can happen if you just put this heavier thread into your needle and make sure that it's a top stitch needle, we just can't stress that enough. So top stitch needle, if you just put this into your machine and started stitching it, probably, let me try to mimic that. All right, I'm going to put my tension up too high just so you can see what that looks like. Okay, when I start stitching, I do like to hold on to that top thread. You don't have to hold on the bobbin thread. You just have to hold that the top thread doesn't get pulled down inside. So right now my tension is higher than that first stitching line. And I want to try to show you an ugly. thing. All right, let's see if it will do ugly. Oh, it doesn't look as bad as I thought it would, but hopefully you can see that this thread isn't being pulled down into that quilt sandwich as nicely as this is. So let me try to, I'm trying to get an ugly for you. All right, we'll try this. Okay, I'm trying to get it to show you what too tight of a top tension looks like. Okay, let's see what we've got here. Okay, I think now you can see on camera that this thread looks really tight. It doesn't look like a nice humped, relaxed stitch. And so that is, gosh, it just looks really tight. And I hope you can see that on camera. Then the other problem that can happen is if your tension is too loose, here's what you'll get. I hope I'm not bumping the camera too much. Okay.
Nope, the
Oops,
camera is very stable.
I just did that time though, as soon as I said it. Okay, now this stitch I think looks quite nice on the top. It looks like a nice humped stitch. I like how I can see every stitch. Now on the back, I can see my top thread coming through a little bit here. And I can kind of, it almost looks like holes in the fabric. It doesn't look nearly as pretty on the back as this one over here on the right. There's definitely a big change from here to here. Because what's happening is as I'm monkeying with how hard my machine is pulling on this thread, that's what dictates if the thread from that's supposed to be on one side of the fabric pokes through the quilt sandwich to the other side. So that's what's going on there. Now I also showed over here that the decorative stitches work really nicely with spaghetti. And sometimes instead of just a straight line, it's fun to do a wig-wag like this, but you want to make sure that the stitch is lengthened a lot because we don't want that needle. It's a big needle. It's a big needle. We don't want it pulverizing the fabric by going into the fabric too close to a previous stitch. And so I am mindful of that. I do like to starch my quilt top a little bit, and I starch my quilt backing a little bit so that it holds up a little more to the pounding of that big needle. So there's a little sample piece. Now, every project that I make a sample piece. Usually it's a little bigger than this, of the fabric I'm going to be stitching on in my quilt top, the backing, and the batting. Tests are invalid if you don't use exactly what you're using in your project. If you're using starched fabric in your project, your test needs to be starched fabric. And I think a lot of times people want to play around and test on some ugly fabric that you have no intention of using, but the test has to be valid. And it's not valid unless you're using the same products, the same stuff that you're putting in your actual project. Now, we had a question earlier about somebody's guilty of using the ugly fabric. You just messed up. So, oh, that was good. I like that. So we were taught with machine quilting to start with those those little woodpecker stitches and then just cut the threads right at the surface. Well, if you do that with this big, beautiful spaghetti thread, you make a thread booger. You make a thread booger on the surface of your quilt, and that is just not attractive. So I pull my threads to the back, and then I tie off and I bury the tails, okay? Now, this is a little sample of without spaghetti thread, but I had this handy, so I thought I'd show you how I tie up. So on this sample, this is my quilt top, and I was stitching with a thin thread. And this is my back. And what I did was when I got to the end of that stitching line over here, I pull my bobbin. This is the back of my quilt. I pull the bobbin, and then a loop of that top thread will come out. And then I'll pull that top thread back there. And then I will tie these two threads in a knot. And I want the knot to be at the end stitch. Clear here, not back here, but here. And then I want to bury these tails. Well, I used to bury them with a tapestry needle. And if you use that, or that type of needle, you have to cut fresh ends of this thread, and then you have to lick them so that you can get them threaded into the eye of a needle. Well, there's a cool thing on the market. This lady in Minnesota came up with this spiral eye side threading needle. So there's a graphic of it. There are some self-threading needles on the market that have like a fork up here where you pop the thread in. Well, I find that shreds my needles, or shreds my threads, I should say. And also, if you pull on that other kind of needle really hard, the threads pop right out the end. So the spiral eye side threading needle is awesome. The website is here, theneedlelady.com. The needle that I like the best, she makes a bunch of different needles. I like the SE4. Oh, somebody else likes that needle. It's awesome. Okay. So that's where you can get that. So anyway, here's how that needle works. Oh my gosh, it's so awesome. So there's a little break in the eye. So I hold these two threads, and then I saw this back and forth, and see those threads popped right in there. And this works with spaghetti thread too. And then I take that needle and I go in the hole where that came out. And then I'm just under the quilt top, you see? And then I like to cross under my stitching line actually. And then I'll pull this through and I'll pop the knot. Oops, while I was monkeying with it, one thread slipped out of my needle. So I would go back and hook that and do it again. I think because I'm at such an awkward angle here, I'm having troubles. Okay, so then that comes through, and then I pop that knot. And then even with spaghetti thread, you end up with a very tidy ending there. Okay, so that's how I like to do the beginning and ending of those stitching lines. Now with raw edge applique, okay, I'm gonna set my machine to something different. So with raw edge applique, again, I test. So I do like starched background fabric because it holds up to the pounding of this heavy needle. I find that if I use starched background fabric, and if I use Decor Bond instead of fusible web. So under my appliques, I am using a product called Pellon Decor Bond. And there's adhesive on just one side. It's a fusible interfacing, not a fusible web. And if I use that under my appliques and I have a starched background fabric, I find that it holds up well to this heavy needle and I don't have to remove any stabilizer. So I like that. Now that means that my appliques aren't stuck. They are not stuck with adhesive to my background, but I just put a couple dots of glue under there, or sometimes I don't even do that at all. I always do a practice before I go to my actual project. So here are some little practice pieces over here. So I'll lower that needle, lower that foot, and then here's what blanket stitch applique looks like. So you want that straight stitch to go in the background and then take a bite. And then I can monkey around with the width and the length to get a totally different look. And I'm going to move that so that I start on the edge there. And so those are the different looks that I get with that. And I think you could see on this little practice piece over here, I tried some tiny little stitching on there and some bigger, and you see the starched background fabric and the decor bond that's underneath here works beautifully. Now the decor bond, because that applique is not stuck to the background, it's not fantastic for intricate tiny applique pieces. Okay, but I like big chunky ones like that. Let me also show you. There are lots of, different schools of thought on turning corners and stuff. I will show you a couple little quilts under the camera here and address how I did that. So on these outer corners, I like to approach that corner and then have a stitch go right down, bisecting that angle. And then on these inside corners, there are a couple of different options. So I am not seeing that whole question about decor bond. What's that entire question about the decor bond?
It says, so you are putting the decor bond on the applique pieces, like
Yes.
directly on the applique pieces.
So I am drawing on the non-adhesive side of the decor bond, I am drawing my applique image on there, reverse image. If you have lettering or something that matters, if it's a reverse image. So I draw it on the non-adhesive side, and then I cut outside the line, and then I fuse it to my applique fabric, and then I cut on the line, and then I just lay it down on my background fabric. You know what? I should point out the other big benefit of the decor bond is, whoops, sorry. I am running over here to grab a different quilt. This quilt really hogs the camera. I have so many things to show on this quilt. Do you see how this white petal stayed white, even though it's on this darker magenta fabric? The decor bond masks the background fabric from showing through. So that is another big benefit of using the decor bond instead of fusible web. Now, I'm not saying fusible web is a bad product. There are times when that is beneficial, more so than decor bond. But I really like how the heavy needle doesn't do any damage when the applique pieces have decor bond back there. So, and it keeps the applique fabrics the color that they started out as they intended. Let's see. So inside corners, see, I've got one stitch going one way and one stitch going another way. Sometimes you've got to, when the machine needle comes up and like it's going to take a stitch, you need to say, whoa, just a minute, lift your foot back up so that it doesn't take a stitch where you don't want it to go when you come to an inside corner. This is another quilt that was quilted with spaghetti and the Baby Lock Sashiko machine. Okay. Also on this one, I appliqued with on the light aqua with the turquoise, and then you'll see I quilted through all the layers around it with black, and it gives this little quilt a cartoonish effect. I also used spaghetti thread by hand, stitching little X's up here on the prairie points. Yes, that was rickrack around the edge of that other daisy quilt. Oh, and then also by hand, I used spaghetti and I stitched some X's up here just for kicks, right? Also, I really, really, really love, before I fold my fabrics into prairie points, I stitch on them. I add embellishment on my prairie points. I love doing that with a little zigzag and spaghetti thread. This one also, raw edge applique with spaghetti. And I did on the appliques, I appliqued with one color and then I quilted through all the layers around it with another color, because life is too short for just a few colors of thread, you know. It's it's just way fun. And this is a straight stitch. I think it's like probably a 3.0 stitch length, just a straight stitch with my feed dogs up. And gosh, I think there we have it. I'm going to move everybody back over to the design wall. So let's hope that this works and that I don't go dark again. Okay. All right. So
Okay.
I'm covering up the camera while I take you over here so that nobody feels like they're, on a cruise ship when I'm moving things around. Okay. I am going to change it back to me. Am I here?
There we are. Yep. There
Okay.
you are.
Awesome. So, oh, my design wall looks so plain. Everything's in a heap on the floor here. Does anybody have any other questions? I mean, I think I learned a lot about more ways to use spaghetti that I haven't tried, with all those beautiful samples that you showed, Stephanie. I'm gonna have to try some more stuff.
I know there was definitely a lot to cover. I was actually thinking too, I forgot about red work and that kind of stuff. And we have some samples of red work with spaghetti, and you can do that either on the embroidery machine or by hand as well. And
Right.
I think there was a couple questions we missed during your section. Maura, can you open the Word doc? It was, what was the brand of your finger or your little tool that you use? Your thimble, I think?
The Eversone is the finger caught. The thimble.
Okay.
Oh, I lost it again. The thimble is Roxette.
Okay.
You can see where I've worn the paint off of it. Roxette thimble and Eversone needle pullers. I've got the needle pullers on my website if anybody's interested. Oh, I also have the these Sashiko needles on my website too. I love.
Oh, great.
Things.
So they
They're
can
so
find
nice,
those tools on your
nicely
website,
made.
right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That makes it easy. Okay, great. And I think we
My gosh,
answered
I
a lot
feel
of
like I
those.
learned a lot from all of your samples that you showed.
Yeah,
I
it's
feel
definitely
like I
a
learned a lot.
jam-packed session. Yeah, I think it was very informative to, show people how to adjust the tension and stuff and play around, because every machine's a little bit different too. And,
Yes.
every bit of it kind of affects how tension might look, whether it's the fabric, the batting, the thread.
Yes.
All plays a different role. So getting comfortable with tension, I think, is a huge plus.
Yes. Yeah.
Mm-hmm,
And
definitely.
the main point is just
So
don't be
I'm just gonna
afraid of
wrap
messing
up.
around with it.
Yes, definitely. So I was just gonna wrap up. We're a little bit over time, but I think everyone's totally okay with that because of all the stuff we were able to learn. So I just wanted to announce the winners of these spaghetti thread packs that we have here. So Laura has texted me the names of the winners. Okay, the first one is Sheila Fuller. Do we have? If you can type in the chat and tell me you're here, that would be great. And yes, this is recorded. So for anyone that wanted to watch this again, definitely you can. Is Sheila Fuller here? Hold on, Moore's just gonna check. She's here. Okay, well, Moore's gonna write down the email that you can message to collect your prize. Oh, we'll email you. She said we'll email you. So there we go. There's our first winner. Our second one is Marie Black. Do we have Marie Black or Mary Black? Oh, there she is. Okay, great. There's our second winner. Okay, awesome. So we'll connect with you and have these things shipped right over. Okay, and now for the exclusive deal. So right now we're going to be offering these threads. So there's 60 colors. 60 colors. And we just got them on our website. So right now we're doing 10% off on it. But what your special deal is for any spaghetti or fruity product, we'll actually offer you guys an additional 5% off. So if you're interested in getting the full set, you'll actually get 15% off that full set, which is a really nice deal. If you're doing any on the road summer projects, it's definitely like a great size to have with you along the way. So definitely take advantage of it. And Maura has typed into the chat the code that you'll need to use to receive that 5% off those spaghetti products. And that includes like the thread packs if you wanted like the full collection. There's actually 5 different colorways. I have 4 with me. The one that I don't have with me is her neutral color, which is like a great option. Like she showed you, she used a lot of those charcoaly colors for outlining and the whites and stuff. So she has 1 more pack. So you can always grab those either on Susan's website or our own. And we also have this one. This one is by Violet Craft, and she also curated a nice fancy pack of spaghetti as well. Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, and our winner will get these really cute stickers too. So this one says, "Sewing mends the soul," and we have some little threads here. And then this one I'm sure everyone could use is, "I'm busy sewing, do not disturb." So yes, that is pretty much it. I think I just wanted to let you guys know that on our website, if you do choose to purchase thread, I would encourage everyone to shop local first and check out to see if there's any thread stores near you where you can pick up the spaghetti. And we have a map, so you can kind of choose your location, and stores will pop up where that thread is being carried. And let me see what else. We're planning to do more thread talks in the future. So encourage your friends to sign up for our newsletter. I hope I can see you guys again. And you can follow us and Susan on Facebook and Instagram. We'll leave all that information in the follow-up. Kind of got chopped up in the middle. So don't worry about that. We definitely have all of that recorded. And so that's pretty much it from me. Thank you again so much, Susan, for staying with us and showing us all your quilts and your fancy tricks that you have with spaghetti. I really appreciate it. I think I speak for everyone here. So yes, thank you everyone for coming. Many love, Susan. So inspiring. I agree. Yep.
Thank you for doing this. This is so appreciated. I know it's a lot of work on your part, and thank you so much for sharing so much good information. I hope everybody takes advantage of future thread talks.
Oh, thank you so much. And I hope we can see you again soon at the upcoming quilt festival and quilt market. Hope you guys can show up to some shows soon as well, if that's near you. But I hope everyone has a great day and enjoyed this thread talk. I look forward to seeing many of you again, maybe next month. So thank you again, Susan. Thank you, everyone. And we'll be signing off now. Okay. Thank you, everyone.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.